So, welcome to round number 7, one of the most critical games in the tournament. Now, I was playing with the black pieces against an international master, and after my quick draw with the white pieces, I really needed to survive this. And yeah, it was a long fight. So, let's have a look how the game started. It started with the London system. I played bishop d6, castles, c3, he allows me to double his pawns, but that also gives him a very good control in the center if he gets his pawn to f4. But I was still inferior here. I had to check this line a bit. Takes, they usually take by knight. And now I attack the f4 and break in the center. I accept an isolated pawn, but I have also created some weaknesses in his camp already, and it's not so clear where the king would go. He played queen e2, which is good. And now I played the first quite big inaccuracy. I should have played rook e8 or queen d6, but instead I saw some issues there which are not quite true. For example, rook e8, I thought he would later gain some time against my rook, but I just didn't pay attention to details. So, for example, I thought he could go king d1, but there's knight g4, and I get immediate counterplay either here or here. It's not so easy. So this would be a much more active version than what I got in the game. Also, queen d6 is a move which I quite like because he needs to get his king somewhere. And if he castles, it's at least not only about the isolated pawn. For example, I can get some counterplay against the king because the queens are still on the board. There are some weaknesses already, and I think black has decent chances to fight back and not to be a lot worse here. Meanwhile, in the game, I got a position where I was just worse and did not really have any chances for counterplay, which is not the best thing to have. So I took on e2, and this makes it quite easy for him to stabilize the knight. Knight b3 is a good move. This knight is kind of untouchable here. Meanwhile, knight on f3, I can always think about bishop g4 ideas and then trying to fight for the d4 square by trading in my bishop. Also, he can never control the e4 square because the knight is in the way of the pawn. But with knight b3, he managed to do all that, and I, tried to set up my pieces, not to trade pieces, because I'm playing with the isolated pawn, so I want to keep things complicated, but still, there's not so much play, and I was squeezed a bit from here. Now knight c5 was a good move, and I really don't like my decision here. I played b6 to hit the knight and guard my pawn, but something like rook a to b8 would be more tenacious, I think, because with the move pawn to b6, I weaken a lot of those light squares, and that can really backfire because his bishop gains a lot of scope in the meantime. So he took and played h4, and I was afraid of different plans like rerouting the bishop to h3, where it could be very good. Still, I thought I'm kind of solid enough. Nobody can expel my knight, and the knight is guarding the pawn, but still it's a lot of suffering ahead, and I don't really have any targets here to play against. So I played g6, knight b5, rook c8. I think that was good. Bishop to f1 and pawn to a6, hitting the knight, rook c7. He cannot come in on my 7th rank. I was just intending to play king to f8, and he cannot double the rooks, as this would be a big blunder due to knight d4 check, breaking the connection of the rooks and winning the e7 rook for my knight. So he can't do this. He also, of course, didn't go for that, but instead he played knight to c2, trying to reroute the knight, finding some targets. I played king to f8, stopping rook e7 forever. Knight comes, knight c5. Still everything looks pretty stable, but he tries to attack all my weaknesses. So he does this very well, attacking here, attacking there, trying to make my pieces passive and overload them in the long run. So now rook d2 played. I now played a5, another move which I don't really like looking backward. I wanted to kick this annoying knight, but I think b5 is much safer. Also now I take some pressure off the a6 pawn, and at the same time I also prevent this pawn push, like forever, and also I might have a stable square for my knight on a4, where I'm protected. Meanwhile, if the pawns would be the other way around, I can never really jump there because it's always running into some bishop b5 hitting rook and knight. So I would really prefer b5 if I would play this position again, but I didn't go for it. I played a5. Now I was hoping for some tiny tactics, because first I thought he would go knight to d3, and I just saw the option that I might get, like, with this fork, a pawn and a rook for my two knights, but that's not good for me. And I thought maybe he is allowing this because, like, this trade two knights for the rook, it's good for him. But there is another detail, because I can give this check and then take by the pawn. And his rook is unprotected, and by this pin I'm getting back into the game and I'm even better. But of course he didn't fall for this one. He played knight c2, knight c6, sorry, not allowing any pin, and yeah, hopping with the knight to d4, where it's again stable, and he will later attack my d5 pawn again. So I play a4. I tried to take b4 out of the position forever, but it creates another weakness. This pawn will sooner or later be a target itself, so I should just have waited. b4 is probably not the worst thing which would happen to me. It would also give me some scope with the rook and so on. So instead I should have played something like rook d6, rook e8, trading a pair of rooks maybe, but just keep the pawns where they are so they don't become targets themselves. a4, a3, he fixed it, and I tried to repeat moves because this rook is not having that many squares, but it's having enough squares. Rook d1. Now he cannot double, but I have nothing better than to go back. Bishop b5. Now he's eyeing all those weaknesses, and even though bishop and knight might look a bit weird, I cannot even attack them. I tried rook d6, and now I would have loved to play knight to e6, hitting the rook, but it doesn't work. Even though this looks a bit unstable, I cannot really exploit this dependency, and I cannot hit the bishop enough that I win something here. There are some ideas like knight d3, but it just trades the knight. Also rook c6 is an idea, but bishop takes, and I just regain the material while being a pawn down. This is not a good idea. So this doesn't work, so I decided to play it solid. Rook c8, hitting the knight. Knight goes back. Now my pawn on a4 is safely guarded, and I tried knight to e6. Rook went to d1. Rook a8. Rook d2. And rook a5. Bishop comes in, knight c7. Now I got a bit tricked. I got a bit too passive. I really couldn't figure out the best setup in time trouble. And finally he won my pawn here because he had c4, bringing in a fifth attacker, and I cannot do anything. However, I was still happy with what I found, because in this position we suddenly realized, both of us, that it's not so easy for him to make progress. For example, if he is just waiting, okay, I'm also waiting, and in fact I have enough time. If he's removing too many pieces to create some other threats, well, then I'm finally able to take the d5. So things are not so easy, but he tricked me in quite a clever way, and I will show you how. I will not analyze this endgame. It's probably lost anyway, I must say, but it's not so easy to find a plan. For example, there are some variations where the king wants to come, but I can always check and go back. So it's not so easy. Also, once he activates a rook, the other rook is undefended, and there are some tactical resources, like sometimes rook takes c6 if the knight is gone as well, and I'm winning a piece. So he needs to take care, but there should be something how he can convert. However, it was not so easy, and I got some chances. He first maneuvered his knight around a bit, but on f4 it's actually worse because it's no longer guarding this bishop. And here I had this great knight g8, which I didn't think of in time trouble. And I can not only hit the d5 pawn, but from e7 I also hit the bishop, and I can also take on c6. And black is very much back into the game. However, I didn't go for this. I just moved my rook back and forth. That goes quick. I can make those moves easily, but he also realized that he will bring his knight back to b4 because it's better there. And now, so in this position, if he moves his rook away, I might in some instances be able to take the d5 pawn. Not here, because now I'm kind of pinned on the d file. I saw this, of course. He will just pin me, and it's a pin. I can do nothing about it, and I will just lose. However, he tricked me finally to take the pawn by doing some maneuver. I cannot recall immediately. I cannot recall the very concrete move orders, but what happened was actually something like this. He played around with his king a bit. He played rook to e1. I guarded the e7 entry with my king, and now I thought, okay, I might be able to take on d5 next, because it might not be a pin, but it might be a discovered check at the end, because his king is on g2 rather than on f2. So I thought if he goes back there, okay, then I'll just wait, but he went to h3. And I thought, okay, this is the moment to go. Now I will take on h5 because f4 is also a discovered check. I thought like he blundered this, but he actually saw further and he saw that it doesn't work. So I should just have waited with rook c4 and see what he will come up with. But I took this pawn and this was the fatal mistake, because after bishop takes, knight takes, I realized what I have done. He played rook to d1. And of course it's a discovered check, but this rook is guarded. He has the double rooks there. If my rook was on d8, okay, then I would have a successful discovery. But with just one rook, it's not enough power of the rooks there to win something. So here I'm just dropping the exchange. I took on b4, but I lost soon afterwards. And he won here. Of course, it was a tough position. I was a pawn down all the time. So, well, I cannot say yeah, that it was a draw or something. It was just not a draw. White can improve in many ways, and I cannot do anything, just wait. And yeah, it's a tough position. Maybe White can also win if I wait. So yeah, nothing yeah, to blame there. Just didn't see the tactics, got a bad position. I think the crucial mistake in the game was queen takes e2. It makes it too easy, and I was suffering all the game. Of course, there were some resources after that. I think one of the main points where I could improve was the situation. If I played b5 instead of a5, I think I have a much easier time, but of course, that's all easier said than done in an actual game. So I hope you enjoyed this one. It was a tough one for me. And my opponent also went on to win this tournament with a very strong 8.5 out of 9. So that can happen. And stay tuned how the last rounds, round 8 and 9, will go. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next video. Bye.